For nearly a decade, gaming execs have handed down a single unbending mandate to developers: live service or nothing at all. They told us single-player games were a dying relic of the past, claiming that a $70 price tag simply couldn't sustain the astronomical budget of modern AAA games. According to them, if a game wanted to survive, it had to become a platform, a digital ecosystem designed to capture your attention, hold it hostage for months on end, and slowly but surely bleed your wallet dry with battle passes, seasonal events, and microtransactions. But as we cross the midway point of 2026, the actual data is telling a different story. And honestly, that live service golden goose hasn't just stopped laying eggs, it's actively choking the publishers who bet their entire futures on it. At this point, the illusion is shattered, and the live service model, which used to be viewed as this infinite money-printing machine, has transformed into a massive financial liability that's exposing studios to catastrophic risks. Meanwhile, premium, narrative-driven single-player experiences are the very thing pulling the entire industry back from the brink of creative and economic burnout. My name is Kodiak, this is Legacy Gaming, and today we're breaking down exactly why 2026 is unironically becoming the definitive year of the single-player game. To really get a feel for how we landed at this massive turning point, we have to look at the economic correction that's tearing through the industry behind closed doors. The corporate panic is finally spilling out into the open, and it isn't pretty. The financial reports coming out paint an incredibly grim picture for companies that abandon traditional game development to chase ongoing monetization. Just look at Ubisoft. In their recent financial disclosures, the company reported a staggering 1.3 billion euro operating loss. Let that sink in for a second. This historic low point didn't happen because they lacked ambition, it happened because of a total disconnect from what actual players want. They spent years canceling early-stage, promising single-player projects just to fund live service competitors that ended up dead on arrival. Turns out, players didn't want another forced extraction shooter or a bloated pirate simulator that required 40 hours of mindless grinding just to stay competitive. And look, this isn't just an isolated issue with one company. Across the entire landscape, mid-tier and even massive budget live service clones have consistently crashed and burned within months, sometimes even weeks of launching. Think back to Warner Brothers and the absolute disaster surrounding Suicide Squad: Kill the Justice League, a project that dragged a legendary single-player studio through 7 years of development hell just to deliver a bloated live service looter shooter that lost the company $200 million. Or look at Sony, completely pulling the plug on Conquered and restructuring their entire multiplayer initiative after realizing players had zero interest in another generic hero shooter. The harsh reality of the current market is that players really only have space in their lives for one or two forever games. If a new title can instantly dethrone a giant like Fortnite or Call of Duty, it's basically over before it starts, because that is where the money is, with gamers who are already so entrenched in that game model. Yet for years, gaming execs have ignored this basic limitation and greenlit dozens of these live service projects all at the same time. Well, now that bill is finally coming due. The industry is waking up with a massive hangover, realizing that chasing the next endless revenue stream has left them with half-baked games, abandoned communities, and billions of dollars in sunk costs. When you look at why this whole strategy is collapsing, it really comes down to a deeply felt cultural shift: pure slop fatigue. The issue was never that people suddenly stopped wanting to play with their friends or jump into competitive online spaces. The real issue was that publishers stopped making actual games and started making digital storefronts disguised as entertainment. When every game you buy requires a seasonal roadmap, a premium currency bundle, and an endless checklist of chores just to keep up, the hobby stops being about an escape. It starts feeling like a second job, and honestly, we have just hit that wall too many times, and now we're at the point of exhaustion. Think about the traditional open-world design that dominated the last decade or so. It was entirely built around that infamous checklist model. You know the drill: climb a tower, reveal 50 copy and paste icons on a map, clear out a generic enemy outpost, and then repeat that exact same loop for 80 hours straight just to unlock a slightly better pair of boots. We saw this peak fatigue with games like Assassin's Creed Valhalla, a game so artificially bloated with filler content that it took over 100 hours just to see the story through. That whole design philosophy was explicitly engineered to artificially stretch out your playtime, keeping you logged in for as long as humanly possible so you'd be more tempted to buy a microtransaction or some sort of quality of life offering. But in 2026, that charm of the endless empty map has officially worn off, and gamers are actively pushing back against titles that don't respect their time. Look at the immediate backlash games now face when they try to gate core narrative progression behind repetitive matchmaking queues or gear score requirements. As a collective, we are tired of filler. We are tired of artificial progression that tries to force us to pay real money just to skip the boring parts of the game we already paid full price for. The market is completely oversaturated, the audience is burnt out, and the demand for focused, curated experiences is higher than it has been in a very long time. So while the live service sector has been scrambling to deploy emergency patches and salvage their sinking player counts, single-player developers have quietly walked away and dominated this year. The first 6 months of 2026 have honestly been a masterclass in premium, complete on-launch game design. These titles didn't ask you for a lifetime commitment or a subscription, they just asked for an upfront investment, and in return, they delivered complete, unforgettable experiences. Just look at what games have actually been dominating the conversation this year. We started things off incredibly strong with Capcom's Resident Evil Requiem. This title proved yet again that Capcom is on one of the most flawless runs in gaming history. Requiem didn't offer an open world, it didn't require a battle pass, and it didn't force any weird monetization down your throat. Instead, it just delivered tight, claustrophobic survival horror with immaculate pacing and incredible atmosphere, and of course, that mechanical precision. It became an instant critical darling and a massive commercial success within days, proving that players are absolutely desperate for games that know exactly when to start and when to wrap things up. Around the same time, Team Ninja gave us Nioh 3, which is an absolute triumph of mechanical depth and uncompromising, rewarding difficulty. In an era where so many multiplayer games try to appeal to literally everyone by flattening out their design, Nioh 3 doubled down on what its core audience actually loved. It offered an intricately designed, challenging solo campaign that heavily rewarded player skill and build experimentation, all without ever needing to log into some server or buy into a seasonal reset to keep people playing. Then, of course, we got the massive release of Crimson Desert. For years, we have wondered if this game could ever actually live up to the hype of those staggering gameplay trailers, but the final product was a triumph. Crimson Desert is the perfect example of how you modernize a massive open-world RPG. Instead of filling its map with repetitive, procedurally generated checklists, it populated the world with organic encounters, mysteries, and a physics-driven combat system that is genuinely interesting. It proved a single-player game can still feel endlessly vast without relying on lazy, engagement-driven padding. And we obviously cannot talk about the early summer without bringing up IO Interactive's 007 First Light. This game beautifully blended the legendary stealth sandbox freedom of the Hitman trilogy with the high-octane cinematic storytelling of a premier spy thriller. It delivered on all fronts, especially with its level design, letting you tackle complex espionage objectives however you see fit. There were no multiplayer modes tacked onto the back of the box just to satisfy some corporate quota. It was a pure, polished, single-player blockbuster that quickly became one of the highest-selling games of the entire summer, proving the demand for quality solo adventures are still thriving. The crazy thing is, this single-player renaissance isn't just happening at the very top of the pyramid. Some of the most radical and successful pushbacks against industry bloat are happening right now in the mid-budget AA and indie spaces. Independent developers have figured out a major truth that major publishers have spent a decade ignoring. You don't have to spend $300 million making a 200-hour game to capture the world's attention. Instead, you can find success by delivering a tight 10 to 20-hour experience built around well-designed, engaging mechanics. It's all about choosing to do one thing flawlessly rather than 50 things poorly. Take a look at Karn, which dropped earlier this year and completely redefined what mechanical tension feels like. On paper, a realistic mountain climbing simulator sounds incredibly niche, but by turning the physical act of climbing into a deeply methodical, high-stakes survival experience where every handhold, foot placement, and ounce of stamina matters, Karn became a bit of a viral sensation. It captured that pure, uninterrupted focus of overcoming a brutal environmental challenge, completely free from the usual distractions of modern game design. Oh, and by the way, it sold over 500,000 copies, no small feat for a game like this. In total contrast to the mechanical intensity of Karn, we have Mixtape, a narrative masterpiece that relies entirely on coming-of-age storytelling, music, and raw human emotion. It didn't need a complex combat loop or dynamic loot drops to keep you hooked. It succeeded because it offered a deeply relatable, perfectly paced story that resonated with anyone who's ever used music to navigate the complexities of growing up. We've also seen that kind of creative freedom bear fruit in sleeper hits like Luna Abyss and Esoteric Ebb. These games mix genres seamlessly, combining ideas like bullet hell first-person shooting with deep narrative-driven role-playing mechanics. They were allowed to exist and ultimately thrive because their development teams had the freedom to completely ignore that live service mandate and just focus on creating a distinct, memorable world for a single player to explore. When you look at the collective success of all these titles and many more, a really clear picture starts to emerge. This whole narrative that single-player games are a massive financial risk is just a myth invented by executives who wanted to turn video games into slot machines. The reality is that the live service model is the true financial gamble. When a live service game fails, it loses everything, leaving behind empty servers and a ruined reputation. But a well-crafted, premium single-player game is an asset that keeps its value for years, continuing to sell to new audiences long after its initial launch window closes. At the end of the day, 2026 is delivering a vital, long overdue correction to the entire industry. Players are willing to pay premium prices for video games provided those games actually value their time, their wallets, and their intelligence. The massive financial and critical success stories we have seen over the first half of this year weren't an anomaly, and they definitely weren't a fluke. They were a clear collective declaration from the global community of gamers. We don't want a lifetime subscription to a virtual casino. We don't want our favorite pastime turned into a series of daily obligations and digital chores. We want a beginning, a middle, and an unforgettable end. The single-player game never actually died. The industry just forgot how to make them while chasing an unsustainable corporate mirage. Thankfully, developers are finally remembering and given the freedom to make this medium great once again, and the results are speaking directly for themselves. But guys, we want to know from you. What do you think about the state of the industry, single-player games, and live service games? Are we headed in the right direction? Leave us a comment down below, and as always, if you appreciate the work that goes into making these videos, do me a solid, hit that thumbs up, and consider subscribing. My name is Kodiak, and from everyone here at Legacy Gaming, thanks for watching, and play on.